Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest monologue. And this one is inspired by current events, and it takes me back to a lot of conversations we've had with Wandia and Joya on Maisha Kazini and other friends in other places as well. And it's about the arts. Many people, Wandia included, have lamented about Kenyans' ambivalence or sometimes outright hatred for the arts. But today, I think I've seen a reason to qualify that. We can't say Kenyans hate the arts. That's not accurate enough. What Kenyans hate or what Kenyans abhor is history, and this is why. Because history holds you responsible to behave in accordance with things you know and things you've seen and things you've heard and things that have happened. It's a very natural reaction, but it comes with a lot of responsibility, and that terrifies Kenyans. So our apparent hatred for the arts, like whether it's music, it's literature, politics, political science, and even fine art itself, our ambivalence towards those things is because of the histories that reside in them. You might read a book and it might tell you something about the country, and it's something you don't want to deal with. It might tell you something about your ancestors. It might even tell you something about why things are the way they are, and you don't want to deal with that responsibility. So, the problem we have is that at some point in our history, and I think it's in the formation of the Project Kenya, if I may call this country that, Project Kenya by the colonialists, involved formatting our minds, formatting our history. And for some reason, which I can't quite understand, the British were extraordinarily successful at doing that in Kenya. Because if you think about it, without that formatting, Project Kenya simply wouldn't have worked. Um, if we actually wanted our rulers, the freedom fighters who'd fought the colonialists to be our rulers, then Kenyatta wouldn't have been president. You couldn't have made Kenyatta a leader without formatting history and without making us imposing a history on us which didn't exist. It's simple as that. The Lancaster House talks, etc. It was aimed at creating a cabal or cadre of leaders or a new nobility to replace the one that was leaving and act on their behest in the future. So that was very important to do. And even in the other areas of our humanities. Look at the things you see as art in Kenya today. First of all, there's the sculptures. You see all those stuff there's chintzy stuff that are sold to tourists. There weren't any, no one ever made such sculptures of animals, etc. before tourism started, structured tourism started. Um, if you look at the paintings, etc. All of it is this sort of modern art. There's very little, even for a Kenyan, it's very hard to find what is our history, what existed, where are our stories. At least some of those exist, the stories, and even so, many of them were overtaken by the drive towards so-called modernization, the aggressive imposition of Christianity at the expense of everything that existed before that. I think that's one of the most harmful things that happened in Kenya is the way people got convinced that Christianity or whatever religion they chose to adopt and their cultural history were mutually exclusive. That was very unfortunate. So we went through an era when so many people were almost forced to choose between the two. Now, the reason why we are scared of those things is that they can connect us to the present and that's what the British were scared of as well. And there are many examples. I'll start with one from my field of expertise, conservation. um Anyone who reads about the Anglo-Maasai agreement of 1904, will know that the British did not move the Maasai off those lands. It's the Maasai elders who are co-opted into, put on the payroll of the British colonialists, and accepted the plan and ordered their people to move from those lands. Anyone, anyone, any contemporary young person or present day Maasai person who reads that agreement, reads the history of that agreement, and about even the leases like of Kajiado, the Magadi area, will realize a startling similarity between that and the conservancy agreements that are currently being used to take over Maasai lands. There is no conservancy agreement that some foreigner came from America or Europe and wrote and handed over to people here. No, the first thing they do always is co-opt the elders. Some of these are actual elders, others are political leaders, others are members of those communities that may be in senior government positions, and then they push it. So if someone comes up to fight it, you end up fighting local leaders, which is very risky. And you end up being called. I've heard the line many times, actually, even foreigners telling locals that Mordecai is not even a Maasai, he's a Luo. So why should he be telling you anything about Maasai land? And then I'm looked at through the prism of my ethnicity, not through the prism of veracity of whatever I may be saying. Now, if we look at this thing is not only true over long periods of times of a century like that. It's even in short term. If you look at the competency based curriculum, look at our educational sector. The first alarm bell that rang in my head was when the late Professor Magoha, who is probably the main architect of this mess, he said he was touting the virtues of CBC, and he even said that I cannot find a plumber in Siaya to come and fix the plumbing in my home. There immediately an alarm bell rang in my head, because I thought, like, he can go and find a plumber someplace else. Not everyone needs to be a plumber to come and fix his stuff. He himself is not a plumber, or if he's worried about that, he could take a textbook and learn about plumbing and fix his own pipes. But it meant without saying it expressly, it meant that CBC was to stop education and introduce training. Competence training and education are two very different things, and that's where the rot started. So then they started bringing in all these long stories. Or will be equipped to go and work as welders in Germany, or bus drivers in Germany, or builders in the Gulf states, etc., etc. I kept waiting to hear where we are educating Kenyans to go and work wherever they want to work, as artists or musicians or scientists or engineers or whatever, or doctors. Because I've said before, a doctor saving lives in China is a contribution to humanity, even if he's from Kenya. So that's when I realized this thing was meant to dumb down the population. Secondly, it was meant to create hierarchies. So they came up with all these strange things they called parental involvement, but they were all just parental expenses. It's very expensive. And these were all filters. A kid who can't have access to a smartphone can't make it through the exams. A kid who can't have access to certain tools in the home, who doesn't have a parent present in the home, cannot pass these tests they're giving in CBC. And that was another filter, because they wanted to reduce the number of poor people coming up in the world, in coming up in Kenyan society. So they brought in those filters, and again, that cut off a whole bunch of other kids. But unfortunately for them, a bunch of these kids still struggled and found their way and passed exams, now going to university. So this brings me to the committee they formed to review CBC. At the very outset, the deputy president said, we are not removing CBC. We are not reversing it. So that preempted whatever the committee was going to do, which was then was useless. Fast forward to now, some of these kids have struggled and passed. In spite of all the bottlenecks Magoha and others put in their way, they still got through their hard work or whatever. So enter now what we are talking about now, the new university funding model. Obviously, it's fraught with problems. Fraught with problems. It's rotten. It's rubbish. But then, true to form, we have a committee to review it. And people are saying, oh, now we want to go and talk to the committee. Now, this is why I want to talk to Kenyans about history. If you know in your mind that CBC was created to put you down, why do you think the same people who created CBC would want to fund your education in university? The purpose of that model is to remove university funding, is to create so much confusion and hurdles to jump over that you cannot access that funding, is to make university education a preserve of an elite few. And that is what it is. That model is, I should call it, the university anti-funding model. It's meant to keep you out of university through these various machinations. So eventually the wealthy will get through university. And with the cost of courses, obviously the higher pay, the professional courses are highly expensive, and remaining accessible only to the elite. And those there are many kids now who will simply pass the exams, but you can't make it to university because you're put in there. Don't think it's a mistake putting you in another band. Like you've been put in a band, you are a poor person and you've been put in a band of someone who has. No, it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake. They know what they're doing. University funding is just university funding. It should be just for education, student centered. If if we are funding students to study medicine, those who get grade A, then even if a billionaire's son or daughter gets A, he's entitled to that funding for that course. Just as if the pauper's son gets an A, he's entitled to the same funding. That's what it means, education being an equalizer, because it's equal opportunities. Government has no business making my parents' status somehow be the determinant of my fate, especially in terms of education. We know parent status in Kenya is already determinant of whether you get a job in government. It's determinant of whether you get into the armed forces and you get all these government government loans, like for in the tourist fund and all these other government opportunities. We already know that parent status determine that, but we now brought it into education. So don't kid yourself. The new education funding model is meant to keep put down the few of you who escaped the dragnet that is CBC. Now, if we look at what about, if history is such a problem, what is it with our history scholars? Because we do have history scholars in this country, but what I've noticed that they studiously avoid teaching or studying history that can be connected to our situation today. Apart from a courageous few, and I can name some like the late E.S. Atieno Odhiambo, the late Peter Ndege, the late Mwangi wa Githumo, Maina Kinyati, maybe Mukaru Ng'ang'a even, and a few others. But the vast majority are teaching in great detail about things that are not connected to us today. They matter, but they those things they are teaching matter, but they studiously avoid what can provide a reference to our situation in Kenya today. And that is the problem with our country. We avoid these histories. Now, if we look at what's going on in the political scene now, we are in a sad situation where Kenya does not have an opposition. Um, the deputy president is up against the wall and looks like he's going to be impeached. He gave a long Jeremiah the other night about the problems and woes he's going through in office. None of which I'm particularly moved about. But what worries me is what it portends for our society. Because if you look at what the deputy president said, If those were all a bunch of lies coming from the deputy president, then we don't have a functioning government. And on the other hand, if those things were all true, it still means we don't have a functioning government. So what it portends is that what it says is that we don't have a functioning government in Kenya today. The center is not holding. But you see, Kenyans are all concerned that, oh, it serves him right. I think this, I think that, I think that means that so and so might be appointed. What does it mean for the mountain? That's all rubbish. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all to this country. What matters is that we need a functional government, regardless where they come from, and we do not have that. That is the dysfunction at the very height of governance structures. Then you look at the situation with the opposition. Um, what we have now, people pretend like it's new, and I'm shocked when people, especially of my age or older, act shocked like what's going on now. Did this happen with NDP in the 1990s in Moi government? Wasn't there something called a merger with KANU? First, it started called cooperation with KANU. Then it was called a merger with KANU. With Kibaki government, there came something called Grand Coalition government. And that was there, very heavy on the taxpayer. With Uhuru Kenyatta's government, we had something called a handshake. That happened, and we bore the price of that. So now we are calling it broad-based government. These are all different names, but it's the same thing going on. And why do we pretend that like this is something new and surprising and something that somehow merits new thoughts? It's what's gone on for. I mean, the time range I'm talking about is nearly 30 years. So, but this is because we are terrified of history. Even in our personal lives, I think trust is based on history. Love is based on history. Anger, um, anger, favor, happiness is so much is based on history. How is it that Kenyans expect to function without any reference to our history? Personal, ethnic, national, even regional history as Africa. We have to understand. That's why we still have all our sectors. We are just talking about some sectors in all the bills coming through in Kenya. We have our agriculture bills being influenced by Monsanto, Syngenta, and these other agribusinesses. We have our water legislation being influenced by Coca-Cola, Diageo, other corporate interests. We have our health bills being influenced by the Gates Foundation, Big Pharma, and all these. And and this is the reason why we accept this is because we've ignored the history. When was the West ever interested in building us up? They have never been. So why do we think they are now? And then when it all goes bad, we are somehow surprised. Oh, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this kind of thing? And look at even at our independence history as a nation. As I said, the captors took over, formatted our history, and owned the narrative of liberation. The captors chose our liberators. We have to understand that. After torturing and killing so many people, the British government came and built an ugly statue in Uhuru Park, an eyesore, claiming that this is true to history. There's some woman there giving food while turning the other way and all that. No, they were not doing such things. The Mau Mau was based on trust. You don't look away because you don't want to see who you are giving those things. How do you even know how did you know where to meet or who you are giving the food if it's not a traitor? How did you know it's not a traitor by not if you don't look at him or her in the face? So these are stories cooked up by the British, formatting our independence history. Look at the statue of Kimathi, Dedan Kimathi on Kimathi Street. A totally cooked up statue, cooked up by a bunch of artists at Kenyatta University. If you look at that thing, he's in a position ready to fight. But those of us who've ever seen, even watched movies, which soldier on a battlefield holds his gun by the barrel? Is it a walking stick? So let's not try cooking things up. This is the country that has found 1 million-year-old hominid remains in Ariokotome in Turkana. But we claim we can't find Kimathi's 75-year-old grave in Kamiti in Nairobi. But we are formatting the history by building a statue to him. We are such charlatans in this country. We need to wake up. History is real. And it's interesting how this has gotten into our culture. I once took a portrait photo at one of the studios in Nairobi, and they told me they couldn't give it to me immediately. When they gave me the photos about a week later, they had wiped all the scars off my face. And I don't know who asked you to do that. And said, yeah, we are formatting it to look good and all that. I stood like, that's my history. Those scars are from my past. And they're part of my features. And I'm the one, thank you very much, to decide how I should look or how I shouldn't look. If you think my face is too ugly for your studio, then you should have told me to walk out and not take a photo there. But this is Kenyan, this is the Kenyan make-believe thing we like. We keep lying to ourselves about history. And we'll get found out because Africa is waking up and we are the ones still sleeping. Look what's happening in West Africa. Right now, we actually have a candidate we think will be elected to head the African Union. Well, I will not want to preempt or predict anything there, but let's wait and see those results. That will tell you if we are on the right or wrong side of history.